the hidden legend, the Canary Cancer that destroys bloodlines. Warm greetings, my fellow breeders. Welcome back to Canary Santos Costa. Today, we're going to talk about something many elite breeders prefer to keep a secret, but which, if unchecked, can destroy years of work and the reputation of an entire aviary. I'm talking about feather cysts, that silent deformity breeders call, behind closed doors, the Canary Cancer. It's not just an aesthetic flaw. It's a time bomb that hides in your most beautiful birds. Imagine investing time, money, and passion into acquiring a top-tier flock. And then, during molting season, the tragedy. Yellowish bubbles on the skin, feathers that cannot break through the epidermis, and in the end, a bird unfit for exhibition or breeding. The feather cyst is nature's punishment for an error in judgment. But what's behind this? It's not just bad luck. It's a genetic challenge that few understand, and I'm here to unveil the secret. Be aware, what I'm going to share in this video goes beyond topical treatment. It's a selection and management strategy that protects the future of your breeding program. So, make sure you stay with me until the end. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, leave your like to show this type of content is relevant, and share it on social media to alert other breeders. Let's stop losing time, money, and birds because of this silent mistake. The truth about feather structure and rigorous selection starts now. Why the best breeders conceal this challenge? You must be asking yourselves, if the feather cyst is so destructive, why don't we see more articles and lives about it? The answer, my friends, is simple and, unfortunately, controversial. Top breeders, those who win prizes and sell at record prices, don't much like sharing this information. For a renowned breeder, the presence of cysts is a certificate of genetic fragility. It's proof that their selection failed, that the feather structure of their canaries isn't perfect. And, of course, vanity and market value speak louder. Information, like the canary, becomes rare. They'll talk about vitamins, about humidity, about an unbalanced diet, about anything, except the wrong cross and what the cause is. This is the first secret that needs to be revealed. The feather cyst is, above all, a selection problem, not a daily management one. Management only accelerates the inevitable. This is the great challenge that separates amateur from professional breeders. Professionals understand that the cyst is a ruthless filter. They don't hide it out of malice, but rather to protect their authority and the value of their flock. But here, we go straight to the point. We're going to use their knowledge to safeguard our own breeding program. The X factor, the true genetic blind spot, it's not what you think. We've reached the core of the matter, the X factor that has cost breeders of dense plumage breeds, such as Gloucesters, Norwicks, or most type canaries, sleep. The genetic blind spot is not a recessive gene that openly manifests. On the contrary, it's excess quality transformed into a defect. The feather cyst is the manifestation of a structural problem, the excessive length and density of the feather. Think of it as a genetic traffic jam. The feather is so long and so dense, especially in the so-called frosted Nevado breeds, that the feather follicle, when trying to produce the new feather during the molt, doesn't have the space for its complete and correct formation. The follicle collapses, keratin accumulates, the feather cannot pierce the epidermis to emerge on the exterior of the bird and, instead of a feather, we have a cyst. The big shock is this. The bird you see with that fabulous plumage, that frosted effect that makes it look perfect for exhibition, is, paradoxically, the bird with the highest genetic risk. What wins prizes is often what causes the cyst. The real danger lies in the careless selection of birds that carry a frosted factor that is too pronounced. The amateur breeder looks for the long feather. The elite breeder looks for the feather of perfect structure. The X factor is uncontrolled density. The feather secret. Why the right structure is the only defense. If the cyst is a problem of excessive density and length, the solution, my friends, lies in mastering the secret of the perfect feather structure. The amateur breeder tries to cure the cyst with ointments. The elite breeder prevents the cyst at the feather tip. The key is balance. In a healthy, safe feather, the central shaft must have the right stiffness and opening to guide the keratin growth. In birds prone to cysts, the very long-feathered frosted or Nevado, the feather is often too wide, soft, and uncontrolled in its side barbs, causing the growth to curve back into the skin. It's like trying to fit an overly thick cable into a small hole. Therefore, the only path to defense against this genetic flaw is not the miracle diet, it's visual and tactile selection. You need to learn how to handle your bird and evaluate the quality of the feather before breeding. Look for feathers that aren't excessively soft or woolly to the touch. The feather should be compact and have a defined tip structure. This is the knowledge that champions use. They know that a bird with visually spectacular plumage but with defective structure is a risk not worth taking. The right structure isn't just aesthetic, it's the biological barrier that prevents keratin accumulation. It's your first and most crucial step to safeguard your bloodline. The fatal mistake of 90% of breeders, and why it accelerates cysts. We've reached the point where ignorance meets tragedy. If the problem in a bird with soft feather at its core is genetic, that is, a problem with feather structure, what is the fatal mistake that 90% of breeders make that turns a controllable genetic flaw into an inevitable disaster? It's the excess protein and fat administered during the molting period. The amateur breeder, seeing the bird molt, thinks, "I need to give a boost to help." And they load the bird with egg food, oily seeds, like Niger, or excessive protein supplements. What they don't know is that they are sending the maximum keratin production signal to the bird's body, right when the follicle is already genetically compromised. Think about this. Keratin is the feather's building material. If the follicle is clogged, due to excessive density, and you inject an overload of building material, the result is obvious. The internal pressure increases dramatically. It's like trying to force more water into an already partially blocked pipe. The fatal mistake is treating the molt of cyst-prone birds as if it were the molt of a normal bird. Elite management demands the calculated restriction of protein and fat at the peak of molting, especially for frosted, Nevado, and dense plumage birds, to slow down the feather production rate. This is the management secret that saves a genetically vulnerable bird. The first sign of a cyst: what looks harmless and what is urgent. Early detection is the only chance to mitigate the damage, but most breeders fail because they confuse the first sign of a cyst with normal molting. What looks harmless is the formation of a small bubble, sometimes transparent, other times with a subtle yellowish hue, which usually appears on the wings or back during the molt. The inexperienced breeder thinks, "It's just a swollen follicle, it will burst and heal." This is the mistake. What is urgent is recognizing that any accumulation of keratin, that bubble, that doesn't disappear within a few days with the feather emergence is a structural anomaly. It's not dirt, it's not momentary poor diet, it's the follicle failing. What separates urgency from harmlessness is the persistence of the bubble and the feather's inability to pierce the epidermis. When the cyst becomes large, with an intense yellow color and a firm consistency, it's no longer a sign. It's an infection and a surgical problem. The challenge for the elite breeder is to act when the bubble is small and the bird can still be saved. If you notice any anomalous persistence of swollen follicles, the time to act is now. The intervention is, you must perform a small surgery with the help of tweezers and extract that incipient cyst. Next, you must disinfect the area in question and, finally, apply a bit of silver nitrate to the site. The silver nitrate can dry out the area, specifically the epidermis, and thus prevent the reappearance of a future cyst in that area. Intense versus frosted. How a simple cross defines the fate of plumage. If the feather cyst is fundamentally the result of an excessively dense and long feather, frosted or Nevado, then your crossing strategy is your vaccine. This is the knowledge that separates bird collectors from master breeders. The rule is basic, but its violation is the mistake that costs years. Frosted with frosted? That's the ticket to genetic disaster. The frosted Nevado canary is the one with the long, soft feather that gives that powdery or velvety appearance, generally used for impressive visual aspects in exhibitions. However, it is also the carrier of the risk of hyperdensity. The intense canary is the one with the short, more compact feather that does not exhibit the frosted effect. The intense is the corrective element in feather genetics. The mandatory cross of intense with frosted is not a suggestion, it is a law of elite ornithology. By crossing a long plumage bird, frosted, with a short plumage bird, intense, you guarantee the dilution of density, correcting the structural flaw that leads to follicle clogging. By crossing frosted with frosted, you potentiate the gene for soft and excessive plumage, and the result is the feather cyst. Master this rule, and you will have taken the most important step to safeguard your flock. Beauty without structure is a time bomb. The emergency protocol. The 3 immediate steps to save the bird. If the mistake has already been made, the genetics have already manifested, and the bird is developing a cyst, the time for lament is over. This is the moment to apply the emergency protocol, a 3-step intervention that can save the bird from unnecessary pain and, in severe cases, death. First step: isolate and sanitize. Isolate the bird immediately. Open cysts are entry points for bacteria. The most important thing is to dry the cyst to facilitate drainage. Use tincture of iodine and place it on the cyst to help it dry out. Second step: minimal surgical intervention. As we discussed in Topic 6, if the bubble is small and superficial, your intervention is urgent. With fine, sterilized tweezers, make a tiny cut in the epidermis and press gently to extract the keratinous material, which looks like cheese or sebum. The goal is to completely clear the area. Do not be aggressive. Third step: healing and desiccation with silver nitrate. After cleaning and disinfecting, with betadine for example, the secret of elite bird vets comes in, the application of silver nitrate. This compound not only disinfects but cauterizes and dries the follicle. The goal is to destroy the follicle's ability to clog again, creating a dry skin barrier. This is a drastic but necessary measure that can prevent immediate recurrence in the affected area. Remember, treating a cyst is always palliative. The real solution lies in genetic prevention, in the evaluation of the progenitor's feather structure, but this protocol saves the bird's life in the present. Antagonist feeding. The foods that make cysts impossible. If Topic 5 taught us that excess protein and fat accelerate the cyst, the secret of elite management lies in using diet as an antagonist tool during the molt of at-risk birds. It's not about deprivation, but about intelligent calibration to decrease keratin production. Antagonist feeding focuses on 2 pillars. Reduction of active keratin. At the peak of the molt, reduce egg food and oily seeds, like Niger, to the minimum essential for general health, but not for maximum feather production. This forces the body into slower, more controlled feather production, giving the follicle time to form correctly, instead of being forced to clog. Increased fluidity and hepatic support. The liver, overloaded by feather production, needs help. Introduce foods rich in B-complex vitamins and sulfur amino acids, like methionine, found in milk thistle seeds or specific supplements. This isn't for producing feathers, but for supporting the metabolic processes of cleansing and drainage in the body, aiding in skin health and correct feather formation. Feeding should be a calibrator, not an accelerator. The amateur breeder feeds for volume. The elite breeder feeds for structure. This shift in mindset is what makes the cyst impossible to manifest in birds that are already genetically at their limit. Rigorous selection. How to avoid at-risk birds and safeguard your aviary. To close, my fellow breeders, the story of feather cysts is not about luck or chance. It's about selection and foresight. If you've mastered the intents with frosted rule and the antagonist feeding strategy, you now need to apply the final step, rigorous selection. When pairing up couples for the breeding season, you must always pay attention to the feather structure of each bird. My recommendation, which is what top breeders do, is to select ruthlessly. A bird with a soft, frosted feather structure that is already at the limit should never be crossed with an equivalent bird. Always take care to compensate a frosted plumage with a semi-intense or intense one. Remember what we saw: feather structure is your only defense. Take each of the birds you intend to cross and remove a feather from the lower abdomen of each one. If the feather is excessively soft, frosted, or has a weak shaft, know that this type of plumage is at the limit. You then have 2 options. Either remove the bird from your breeding stock, or cross that bird with one that has an intense, firm plumage in order to provide compensation, so that the offspring can have balanced plumage. Always preserve birds with the most compact and firm feather structure, even if they are frosted. This is the only way to ensure your young are born with the necessary genetic protection. The story of feather cysts is proof that passion without technique is Russian roulette. But now you have the technique. You saw how elite breeders guard the secret, how excessive feather density is the true culprit, and how a simple correction in crossing and diet can safeguard your aviary. Don't let the canary cancer destroy your work. I hope I have helped. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next elite breeding secrets. Leave your like if this management and genetics information was useful, and most importantly, leave a comment with your biggest question about feather structure. Let's build an unbeatable flock together. Big hug and happy molting to all.